Hello again, Denton, once more. Now, if you looked at the thumbnail to this video and you wondered who that incredibly handsome gentleman was, attired like something from a fancy dress party, well, now that is very relevant to the subject of this video, and I will come to it later on. Performances, you see. Talking of performances, which of course I'm about to do. Talking about them rather than actually doing them, I suppose. That takes me back in time. Not as far perhaps as the tours that are done, but just to the late 1960s and the early 1970s when, as you may have gathered, I trod the boards, as they say. Oh yes, I was an actor, darling, upon the stage. Never in movies nor on television, apart from one little piece on the Late Late Show. No. I trod the boards of the legitimate theatre, as we liked to call it. I don't think there ever was actually an illegitimate one, but no matter. Ah, yes. Memories. The roar of the grease paint and the smell of the crowd, as we used to say. We tended to say things like that. Oh, yes. There are quite a number of theatres here in Dublin, though sadly not as many as in my day. We've lost the historic old Theatre Royal and the Queen's Theatre, among others. Dublin, in the rare old times, as the song has it, no longer exists. You know, they having given way to what was laughingly referred to as progress. Progress, yes. Or in other words, pulling down real architecture that was magnificent to look at, that had style and grace and grandeur, carefully designed by skilled architects, and replacing it with glass boxes. Glass boxes that a 5-year-old child might have designed in a kindergarten art class. I mean, buildings that are little more than horizontal lines and vertical lines, with the spaces in between filled in with glass. Now I ask you, how very hard is that? There is even one building in Dublin that resembles a beer can that has fallen over onto its side. Oh, I do despair. But I digress also. Theatres. Now, I myself played in the Abbey Theatre, the Peacock, the Gaiety, the Olympia, the Ablaner, and the Gate, and on tour in the City Theatre in Limerick and a hall in Listowel in the County Kerry, and 2 of those are gone now as well. I suppose the Gate Theatre here in Dublin stands out in my memory, since there I had the honour of working with the great Micheál Mac Liammóir and his partner Hilton Edwards. A little funny story. Yes, a little funny story before I proceed with the actual subject of this video. In the early 1970s, you see, Micheál Mac Liammóir was the most famous actor here in Dublin. And I remember the first time that I met him, backstage in the Gate Theatre. I saw him coming down this corridor towards me in his majestic way, as he always walks in a sort of majestic way, you see, darling. And it was like meeting God. Well, actually, in the Dublin Theatre of that time, he was God. Now, how shall I address this august personage? He had just been made an honorary doctor of something or other by Trinity College, I think it was. People had started calling him Dr. Mac Liammóir. So, now, I thought, yes, that will do. It is suitably reverent to his status. So I said, "Good morning, Dr. Mac Liammóir." He stopped, and he looked at me for a moment, and then he put his hand slowly on my shoulders, and he said, "Young man, my name is Micheál, and if you ever call me Dr. Mac Liammóir again, I shall cut them both off." And he went on his usually majestic way along the corridor. Memo to me in future, call him Mick. I was known to imitate him from time to time, which I still do, as you may indeed have noticed. Now, this little talk is entitled, "It'll Be All Right on the Night." Yes. That famous theatrical phrase supposedly trotted out when rehearsals aren't going particularly well. Maybe the costumes haven't arrived, or the scenery isn't coming along on schedule, or perhaps it just fell down altogether. These things did tend to happen. Sure, don't worry. It'll be all right on the night. That's what they say. Well, no, it probably won't. While I don't actually ever remember hearing that phrase used, my experience in the Dublin theatre was actually that if something can go wrong, then it will. And it will do it in the most obvious and scene-destroying way possible, making sure that everyone in the audience has seen it, often turning a solemn, tear-jerking tragedy that would melt the hearts of any audience into a comedy worthy of Mel Brooks or the Marx Brothers. The audience in tears right enough. Oh yes, tears would be flowing, but tears of laughter rather than tragedy. And that is not good. You don't really want an audience howling with laughter, splitting their sides as Hamlet has a conversation with a skull, or Othello is strangling Desdemona. It tends to take away something from the scene. It's rather strange that I hardly recall those performances that ran smoothly without a hitch, just as we had rehearsed them, whereas those that did not stand out in my memory like a searchlight in a dark room. And they occurred rather more frequently than you might imagine, and you may consider them all lumped together, I suppose, under the heading of a fuck-up. Does that surprise you? I mean, after all, I was working in the professional theatre business, in the most important theatres in Dublin, darling, not some little amateur theatrical group in the arsehole of Kerry or somewhere. The bally no-talent players whose costumes were any old thing they could find in their closet, and several of the women's parts were played by men putting on squeaky voices because there weren't enough women in the group to fill all the parts. Oh, dear me, no. Oh, no. You see, I was a professional. But we demonstrated that when it came to fuck-ups, we could hold our own with even the smallest little amateur company. Oh, yes, we could use our professional skills to fuck up even better than the worst of them. Taking such things to Olympian heights of underachievement. We were not going to be outclassed by a bunch of local hick amateurs. As professionals, obviously, we did everything. We did everything better than mere amateurs, including the onstage fuck-ups. But first, before I turn to some highly professional but nonetheless often disastrous examples of such things, my own amateur story. Oh yes, dear, I was an amateur, but only once. I'd only ever taken part in one amateur dramatic performance before I turned professional, playing Sir William Collier in Terence Rattigan's The Deep Blue Sea, which was performed for one performance only, but not at enormous expense, I can assure you, in the Dag Hall in Dublin's Westland Row, at 8 p.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd of May, 1968. And here is a photograph of the playbill for that illustrious event. Yes. Torch Amateur Productions. Well, that torch was not particularly luminous, it must be said, certainly not an Olympic flame by a long way. And even though we only did that one performance, we managed two truly superb fuck-ups, which is a neat trick if you can do it. And we could, and we did. Now, the first involved a gas meter. The play opens, you see, with the heroine lying unconscious on the floor, having tried to gas herself. A neighbour breaks in the door. He rushes into the room. He turns off the gas at the meter, and he saves her life. The very epitome of high drama. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way. Now, the gas meter wasn't actually a gas meter. I mean, well, that would be much too much to hope for, wouldn't it? It was, in fact, a cardboard box. Yes, a cardboard box painted a lovely shade of red with some dials and things drawn on it with a pen, and a bit of garden hose or something or other sticking out of the back to look like a gas pipe. Now, at a distance, I suppose it looked well enough, but, real gas meters are very heavy. They are solid steel objects, and of course they are also very static, held in place by the pipes attached to them, which for the full effect of the story is very important to remember. The heroic neighbour, rushing to the gas meter to turn off the gas, kicked it. The supposedly solid steel, heavy and unmovable gas meter bounced across the stage in a series of flops. Flop, 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 flop. Very cardboard-sounding flops, hardly surprising, I suppose, since it was, after all, made of cardboard, before ending up somewhere around centre stage. But the actor didn't panic. Oh, no. No, he carried on reviving the unconscious woman. One must give him credit for that, despite the fact, of course, that in real life the entire house would now be filling rapidly with gas pouring out from the open gas line. But somebody else, however, picked up the errant meter, and they put it back, which of course actually made it a great deal worse. It was like seeing a rerun of the fuck-up in reverse. See, the golden rule in the theatre is to ignore a fuck-up if at all possible. Maybe the audience haven't even noticed, though in this case they had most certainly noticed a flying gas meter. Or maybe they'll think it's part of the play, you see, though in this case they didn't. But trying to put things right usually just it draws more attention to it than would be the case if you just left it alone and carried on as though nothing at all had happened. The scene definitely lacked something, like any trace of the tension and sense of drama the author had intended. You know, it's very hard. It's very hard to regain any sense of impending tragedy, any hint of doom around the corner, when the play has just been opened like a Monty Python sketch. Now, the second fuck-up. Oh, that involved a false nose. No unskilled amateur should ever mess with things like false noses, or indeed anything at all that is stuck on with spirit gum, because, see, things that are stuck on do have a tendency not to stay that way, frequently becoming stuck off, you might say. This actor had glued on a large, and I must say impressive, nose. I don't know exactly if you would call it aquiline, but it would have suited the Wicked Witch and the Wizard of Oz very nicely. Why he did it, I don't really know. There was nothing at all in the script to say that his character had a proboscis like the beak on a hornbill. But since he also gave himself a pronounced limp, had a walking stick, and the ways und means of making you talk, you Schwein, German accent you'd never actually hear, of course, from any real German, why not? I suppose he fancied himself as an actor and a makeup artist. Unfortunately, he was neither of those. At one point, he was drinking a glass of whiskey, actually, of course, some watered-down lemonade, when... Yes, you guessed it, didn't you? His beautiful big hooter, his wonderful Roman nose, fell off into the glass with a very audible splash. Now, the Dag Hall is a very, very small building. The splash, of course, was easily audible right at the back. He was instantly transformed into a different person. It was like something out of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where Jekyll drinks the potion and becomes someone else. A completely new character was standing there, who had not been there a moment before. And since he had not put makeup onto his nose to allow the spirit gum, of course, to take, his own nose was now a completely different colour to the rest of his face. Oh, yes, did I mention that he had also made himself up a strange sort of brownish colour, for some reason best known only to himself. Now, when something like that happens, as I've already said, you just ignore it. It's bad enough to begin with, but if you try to fix it, that just makes it worse. It's like saying to the audience, look, just in case you missed what just happened, I'm going to draw even more attention to it to make sure you don't miss it a second time. Alas, he tried to fix it. He fished the nose, soggy and somewhat distorted, rather resembling a mushroom by this time, out of the glass, which took him some considerable time, since it was wet and rather slippery, and it was at the bottom of a very long, thin glass. And when he, after a great deal of fishing, he eventually got it out and shook it off, he tried to put it back on. Never do that. Unless the play, of course, is a comedy. Unfortunately, this one wasn't. Now, the nose was made of a kind of putty, rather soft, of course, so it could be moulded into the shape required and then glued into position. But immersion in the lemonade had not only softened it, so pulling it out of the glass had altered its shape drastically. As I said, it now resembled a mushroom. but it rendered the spirit gum useless because the putty was wet. The now rather misshapen, soggy mushroom nose fell off again, plop, onto the floor. Audiences do tend to notice things like that, and they did. But that was amateur dramatics. So when I entered the prestigious ranks of the professionals, well, things like that just don't happen in professional theatre, do they? No, no. Oh, yes, they did. Enough for several more videos, in fact. Lady Windermere's Fan by Oscar Wilde. The Dublin Gate Theatre, 1972. I was playing Parker, the butler. And here is a photograph from that very production, showing myself as Parker, with the maid and Lady Windermere, and the fan from which the play takes its name can be seen in her hand there on her lap. Yes, that is me. Why, I have not changed a bit. I haven't, actually. I've changed a lot. Mirrors are not my friend these days. Anyway, every night before the curtain goes up, all props, of course, are very carefully checked, making sure that they are where they are supposed to be, either already on the set or on property tables in the wings, ready to be used when required. The stage manager or one of the ASMs will go around with a checklist, and they will see that all is ready for the performance, and everything goes smoothly, without a hitch. Except on those nights, of course, when it doesn't. Now, you would think that the fan, the most important prop in the play, it is called Lady Windermere's Fan, after all. Since the play actually requires the fan even to start, you would think that it would be very carefully checked. Oh, you naive fools. You naive fools, how wrong you would be. The play opens with Parker the butler, performed, need I say, of course, brilliantly by myself, coming in to Lady Windermere. And he announces the arrival of Lord Darlington, who is shown into the room, and Parker then buttles off to do whatever it is he's going to do. Lord Darlington and Lady Windermere exchange a few words, and then he sees an elaborate, beautiful fan lying on the table. He says, "Oh, what a wonderful fan! May I look at it?" To which she replies, "Oh, I do. Pretty, isn't it? It's got my name on it and everything. I've only just seen it myself. It's my husband's birthday present, you know. It's my birthday today. Did you know that?" No, is it really? He says, etc., etc. They go on like that for a bit. Except on this particular night, he didn't actually say that. He said, "Oh, do excuse me, Lady Windermere. I just remembered I forgot to pay my cab. Oh, silly me." Now, the moment you hear an actor say something that isn't in the script, and by the way, he says it, you know he hasn't dried, forgotten his lines, he's just ad-libbing something. No, you know that there is a problem. Lord Darlington comes off stage. He does not look happy. He isn't happy. "Where's the fucking fan?" he snarls in a whisper. "It's not on the table," somebody answers back. "Of course it's not on the fucking table. I wouldn't be here looking for it if it was out there, would I? Where is the fan?" Panic. Panic breaks out immediately. The fan is a vital part of the play. As I said, that's why the play is called Lady Windermere's Fan. Everybody is running around in the wings like the proverbial headless chicken looking for the blasted fan, because Lord Darlington, of course, can go back on with it. He can say something like, "Oh, I found this wonderful fan on the hall table," or something similar, and the play can continue, except that we cannot find the bloody thing anywhere. It's not on the prop table, it's not on the floor, it's not on a shelf, it has vanished. No sign of it anywhere. Now, of course, while all this is going on in the wings, Lady Windermere is stuck out there on the stage, all on her own, no one to play the scene with, no dialogue, just standing there. So she starts wandering around the stage, humming a little tuneless ditty to herself, adjusting a picture hanging on the wall. Oh, yeah, that's right. And then she adjusts another picture over the other side. That's very nice, yes. She arranges some flowers in a vase, with occasional, of course, rather imploring glances off stage, where she could see all of us scurrying around searching for the fan. Eventually, Lord Darlington goes back on stage, minus the fan, of course. I mean, he can't leave her out there any longer. She's already arranged all the flowers twice and straightened all the pictures that are on the set several times. And the two of them try to continue the scene without, of course, any actual dialogue. She, now for no apparent reason at all, says, "You know, today is my birthday." "No, is it really?" says he. Lovely, lovely, lovely weather. Lovely weather we're having, isn't it?" "Oh, yes, yes, indeed. It's perfect for Ascot." "Oh, indeed, yes, sir. I'm sure the Queen will look absolutely lovely." "Yes, well, she always does, doesn't she?" Have you seen that new play at the Lyceum?" "No, no, no, but I hear it's awfully good. And they're trying to think of some ad-libbed dialogue to fill the void left by the errant fan and somehow bring it into the conversation despite its obvious absence when, success, in the wings, the fan has finally been found. Wonderful! Except, of course, that it is off stage when it needs to be on stage. What can we do? Of course, the butler. The butler to the rescue. I grabbed a silver salver, I put the fan on it, and I marched out onto the stage bearing the fan. I said, "Do excuse me, my lady, but this has just been left for you." "Oh, thank you, Parker," she says, and she takes the fan, the relief on her face only too evident. I do my little butlerish bow, turn, and I walk off the stage with the salver under my arm. And Lord Darlington says, "Oh, what a wonderful fan. May I look at it?" And he was probably bloody glad to be able to look at it by that time. The play has been saved, dragged back from the brink by the butler, of course. But I'm sure there must have been those in the audience who were familiar with the play. It's a very well-known play, of course, wondering if we were doing some newly discovered version of it, found among the lost papers of Oscar Wilde. And they would have been thinking, "Oh, this is new. I've never seen this before." No, nobody had. I will conclude with a military fuck-up, which occurred during a performance of Allright na Pogue, which is the Irish for Hour of the Kiss, a humorous melodrama by Dion Boucicault, set in the revolutionary period in Ireland at the close of the 18th century, and performed at the prestigious Abbey Theatre, Ireland's national theatre, in 1970. A group of Irish rebels are assembled in the Wicklow Hills near Glendalough when the British redcoats are seen approaching. There's no time for the rebels to escape. They've been spotted. All they can do is try to bluff their way out of the situation. The soldiers enter, all in a line, marching in step, dressed in beautiful scarlet coats, white cross belts, white powdered wigs, tricorn hats, little white ruffly things at their neck, and long rifles over their shoulders. Remember that, long rifles. And here is a photo from that very production of myself dressed in the lovely uniform of the British Army of 1798. And yes, that is also me in the thumbnail to this video. So, all similarly attired, we marched out, led by an officer with a plumed hat and a swagger stick under his arm. Oh, very impressive, very military, very precise. Or at least, that is what it was supposed to be, except on the night when it wasn't. The officer marched smartly across the stage, followed by a file of men, with myself being the first in line behind him, and we marched out to center stage. Or at least that was what was supposed to happen, but unnoticed by anyone, a large and quite heavy electrical cable had come loose just off stage, directly above our entry point between two flaps, and it was hanging down in a loop about 7 feet up. Now, of course, that wasn't a problem for our officer, but we had, yes, you remember the rifles sticking up. And the end of mine caught in the loop, and as I marched forward, I started to bring the cable with me, attached to the end of my gun. I didn't notice any drag. I was blissfully unaware of the fact that I had been snagged. I strode out onto the stage. I got about 3 strides, well in full view of the audience, and that was as far as the cable went. It stopped. I came to a sudden stop. I let out a sort of "ah!" and I shot backwards, straight into the man behind me, propelling him to the man behind him. It was a domino effect. The entire army ended up back off stage in a disorganized heap. The audience had quite clearly seen two soldiers march out, the leg of a third just coming into view, when all three suddenly vanished. And what made it worse, the rebels, having said that the redcoats were coming, and all of them now staring in trepidation at the very spot that we were emerging from, meant that every eye in the audience was trained right on us. How perfect. Now the officer, of course, he kept going, oblivious to what had just happened. He marched right across the stage. He said, "Company, halt!" He stopped. He swung around. And he discovered that he has no men. His army has vanished. He's there all on his own, as the Irish rebels are all sort of looking off stage, wondering where the hell the army's got to. Now we pick ourselves up, we straighten our uniforms as best we can, and I sort of fall out onto the stage as we all did a sort of hop, skip, and jump routine, trying to get in step, which I didn't really succeed in doing, of course. So we march across the stage, hopelessly out of step, some of us with our hats and wigs all sort of sideways. The officer once again gives the command, "Company, halt," and we do. Any semblance of military precision and spit and polish of uniforms, of course, had gone straight down the toilet. And it was just as well that the play was a humorous one. It would not have done very much for Journey's End or War and Peace. So, there you have a few examples of theatrical fuck-ups. Now there are more. There are many more. Oh yes. Our ability to totally ruin carefully rehearsed productions was seemingly never-ending. Now, it's not just stage actors, of course, who do things like that. They do it on movie sets as well. They do it all the time. But, of course, the public never see it. They just reshoot the scene. But you can't really do that when it's live on stage in front of an audience. Sorry, but they've seen it and they can't unsee it. And I'll be looking at more of these occasions in videos to come, as well as other theatrical things, both humorous and serious. If you've enjoyed this video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and all that sort of thing. Tell your friends how wonderful I am. Modesty forbids me, I suppose, from saying it myself, but feel free to do it. So, as Shakespeare put it, all our revels now are ended. Farewell for now. The show is over. Fade the stage light. Bring up the house lights, and ring down the curtain. Ring down the curtain. Yes, oh well. I will just exit stage right. Amateurs. I do not know. No, I do not know. I do not know. You see, you carefully rehearse these things. You carefully rehearse these things, and then somebody goes along and they screw the entire thing up. Amateurs, as I said. I do not understand. I do not understand it. Not at all.